Now, outside of the defensive side, then we have the pitching. Pitching is very important in baseball. This is the guy who touches the ball every single play of the game when you're on defense. He's the one that starts it off. And basically his job is he stands 90 feet away from the plate, and he delivers the ball with his hand. So it's not like football in that regard. Picture a throw-in, but with one hand. So he's throwing the ball, and his job is to either make the batter miss by swing and miss, or throw it over a very small point of space and have the other player not swing and have a strike, or throw the ball close enough to that point in space where the umpire, the referee, calls a strike by mistake. Nobody's perfect. Or induces the hitter on the other team to hit the ball to one of the players on his team to make an out. So you get 4 balls, 3 strikes, and 3 outs every side. Okay, and then every time you go through that 3 outs, you're through an inning, and there's 9 innings in a game. So, Cowboy, that's going to be something you'll have to watch if you're not sure what all that means. But anyway, pitchers have the same type of ratings that the batters do, just they are pitching related. So this has his stuff, his movement, his control. His control is that ability to throw the ball to a point in space 90 feet away. It's not very easy. Movement is the ability to make the ball move up and down or sideways in small increments to still end up in that point in space, but not be straight, because a straight ball is easier to hit than a ball that's moving a little bit. And so movement is important. And then they have different types of pitches. So a fastball is high velocity in miles per hour or kilometers per hour, usually with a little bit of movement, but it's mostly a straight pitch with a little bit of movement, and you're trying to beat the batter basically with just pure speed. A curveball is a breaking ball. So if you follow my mouse, let's say you're trying to throw it to this spot, and the ball starts here, it comes up to here, and then it ends up down here in a curvature pattern as it's coming towards the batter. Okay, a slider starts here and just drops down and away, and a changeup is very similar to a fastball, except it's at a much lower velocity. It looks just like a fastball, and the goal with that pitch is to get the batter to swing early, thinking it's a fastball, and basically looking silly. But there's a lot of, there's 6 or 7 different pitches that pitchers can learn. Not every pitcher knows every pitch. Not every pitcher has the ability to learn every pitch. So typically, a starter can throw 3, maybe 4, and the great ones might have a 5th pitch. If you're a reliever, and I apologize for the noise, I've got a daughter, and evidently she's causing her mom grief. A reliever is different. Let's take a look at Bruce Souter. He is my closer. Again, same ratings, but he only has 3 pitches. Some only have 2. Let's see if I can find one. He's got 3. Morris, Palmer. Nope, so I've got at least 3. So that's just the staff that I've put together. And again, with pitching, it's not like your picture in Football Manager. If you played every day, right? Your starting 11 could not be out there every day. I mean, they would literally be dead. So same thing with your pitchers. Your fielding players don't, they run, but not 8 to 10 miles like in football. But your pitchers throw 100, to 120 pitches in a game, and they typically will need to rest their arm 3 to 4 days before they're able to go out and throw like that again. So you usually go with what we call a 4-man rotation or a 5-man rotation. 6-man rotation, very rare. I don't see many teams ever use that. And then you have your relievers and your setup men and your closers. So in a game, and unfortunately I cannot, let's see. Okay, yeah. So let's take a look. This is a game, okay? This is a game that I've already played. And you can see it has 9 innings. If you're tied, you actually play extra time or extra innings. So we've won 8-1. But let's take a look at the pitchers. Now, Morris went the whole game. That's called a complete game. Wilbur Wood only went 5 innings before he got pulled. And then they went into the bullpen, the relief pitchers. And you see that they have breakdowns in, they pitch just short durations. And sometimes, like in 1/3 of an inning, he only faced 1 batter. All right. And, so that may be a special situation that you as the manager determine, I want this guy to face that hitter because I think that gives me my best chance for getting an out or whatever. So anyway, that's how that works. Let's look down at roster movement. So in Football Manager, you're used to seeing, let me flip over here. So we have our main squad, right? And then we have our U23s and our U18s. So you can take a U23 player and I can move him to the main squad, right? Just by to the senior squad by doing that, right? Same thing here. We have the major league team, which is the senior club. And then using the breakdown, this would be your U23s, your U19s, and your U18s, U17s, whatever you want to call it. So when you first start off as a youngster, you would start off here and you would progress your way up through the various levels until you make it to the senior roster. But you can see here on the active roster, you can only have 40 players. And during the regular season, which we're in the off season right now, you can only have 25. So you have to balance that out on how many pitchers you have and then how many of each position player that you have. So a little more thought process than Football Manager, because you could, let's say you're playing a 3-5-2 compared to a 4-3-3. Well, you're going to want a lot more midfielders with a 3-5-2. In a 4-3-3, you're going to want more strikers. So, same concept. If you're going with a 4-man rotation, typically you're going to want at least 4 starters. You're going to want a closer and a setup player and probably at least 3 relievers, maybe 4 middle relievers, and one of those relievers you're going to want to have the ability to step into the starting lineup due to injury. If they've got to pitch more than 1 or 2 or 3 innings, if they've got to go 5, 6, 7, 8 innings, you're going to want them to have the stamina to do that. And then you've got to fill out your other 8 positions in the field. So the 3 outfielders, the 4 infielders, and the catcher, along with backups at each spot. And so what becomes a necessity for you is, let's see if I look at my graphical. All right, so you can see this guy, Dower. So if I pull him up, you can see he can play 2 positions, right? And he can play them pretty well. So that is called a utility player. Utility meaning he can play more than 1 spot. Milner's another guy. He can play first base and left field. So the more utility players that you have, Smith, another example, he can play two outfield, and 2 infield positions. So if you have good utility players, some utility players can play 5 or 6 positions. If you have one that's really good or good enough to be a solid backup for you, then that helps free up space on your bench. And that's very similar to trying to get players that can maybe, say, play all 3 defensive positions, or they can play maybe a striker and an attacking winger. Then they can fill multiple roles for you depending on what tactic you're going to, what shape you're going to go with, what tactic you're going to go with in Football Manager. So same philosophy. You have to balance all that out. And then you have to do that with a player cap. So, again, 25, just like in Football Manager. And you also have to do it with a salary cap. And baseball has a salary cap to where all teams are on as even a playing field as they can be. Now, some teams are just better than others. Some teams have much higher incomes because of where they're located, their fan base, what have you. And not every game is a sellout. You can see my attendance last year. Opening day, the first game of the season was a sellout, and then it got pretty, only 10,000 less fans. But then midway through the season, when we were still in the hunt to make the playoffs, you see we start having more sellouts, higher attendances, until late in the season, the playoffs and the championship, which we played in this season here. But you can see our record, our attendance has gone up every year, player expenses. So you can see that last year I had, between my payroll and budgets, $5.1 million. And my $5 million for all my players this year, and that's this year. Next year, you can see I have a lot of openings. These are players that are going to be free agents that I need to try to either re-sign or let them go, just like in Football Manager when you're going to renew their contracts. Now, here's something you may like if you're a Football Manager fan. One of the things that I get upset about is, you have that guy that you just signed to a 4-year extension, and then a year later he comes back and says, man, I need a new contract to, reflect my value to the team. And he wants a new deal with 3 years left on his contract. Well, in baseball, they don't do that. You can't negotiate with them until they're in their last year. And then they still make that amount for that year. The extension starts the following year. So that's good. Makes it a lot easier to balance your finances and figure out what you're doing. To me, let's see, what else? Scouting. There is stuff you can turn on and off. So like I have scouting turned off. You can turn scouting on or off. You have owner, and every owner is a little bit different, and they give you goals that they want you to attain, and that could lead to you being fired or staying on board, right? Retaining your job. They can be like he's hands off in his involvement. You might have a guy that's knee deep in it, and he'll bother you. You'll get emails from him all season long. Hey, do this, do that, draft this player instead of that player. So again, balancing your payroll, your contract amounts, determining when to trade a player or sell a player off to another team, getting players back. Now, another thing one big difference in baseball from football. In Football Manager, of course, there is no draft. You have your youth intake from your system, and then you can buy players from other teams. Okay, You don't buy players from other teams. You do trades, and you can trade either for other players, a player-for-player trade, or you can trade draft picks. And there is a draft. So there is no youth intake. So the way that the youth intake technically works in baseball, in America at least, is you have the college level, the university level, where they have baseball as part of their sports teams. And those players go to college, and while going to college and getting an education, they also play baseball for their university. And then when they graduate, they become eligible for the draft. And I don't think draft order. Here we go. All right, so there is a draft. So your draft is inverse order from the finish the previous year. So we finished with the 4th best record last season. So we have the 4th worst pick every round. Okay? San Diego finished with the worst record, so they get the first pick, arguably so they can get the best player in the draft. So again, they can trade that pick. They can try to get more picks for it. They could try to get a player for it or multiple players. And that's something else too. You could actually do, arguably you could trade one draft pick for 10 players if the other team is willing to do it. The AI is pretty good, but it's not perfect. So there are some ways that you can kind of cheat the game. Not as bad as it used to be, but, we still put kind of like lower league management, LLMs in Football Manager, where you kind of have house rules that you play with. Same kind of thing. We do, you can do house rules. Like one of my house rules, I never initiate a trade. I only respond to trade offers. And that's just so I can't take advantage of the AI. What else? Let's see. Roster movement. We talked about financials already. And we've already kind of touched on the player card. So, your player card, I think it's easier to evaluate players. It's easier to compare players. There is not a direct comparison. So you kind of have to remember what you're looking at here, and then go to, another player and go, okay, is he better or worse than my guy? But I think that's pretty much it. So again, OOTP has partnered up in the past with SI, who makes Football Manager. And they have incorporated some things from that partnership. Now that's been, I think, 4, maybe 5 years ago. But they are not affiliated any longer. But again, if you're looking for a different game to play, this might be it, because it is considered the top tier game in baseball, just like football. There's a lot of soccer games out there, football games, right? But Football Manager is considered to be the best. They put out a new version every year. They're on FM 18 right now, and we'll expect FM 19 sometime later this year. They typically release that with the start or late, early season in the premiership. OOTP typically does their release in conjunction with opening day of the Major League Baseball season. So it just came out on Thursday, 2 days ago, and opening day is about a week away. So they just released version 19. And so next year will be, they'll do version 20, and, we'll get FM 19 at that time. And, it's also like Football Manager. Some versions are just slight tweaks, very minor stuff. And then every few versions, you kind of get like a big major rollout, right? Sorry, the dogs are having at it. they're not fighting. Just the new dog is intimidating the smaller dog. So, you know, a lot of similarities in how they release their games. A lot of similarities in the play. Just like in Football Manager, you can actually do a fast sim where you just sim out the day and it just gives you the results. Let me see if I can find my schedule again. Schedule. All right, so yeah, so when I sim this, I usually sim a week at a time, and then I can come in and I can just look at the box scores. That's what we call these in baseball. And I can look at, the results and the moves that your computer coach gave. However, if you want to play out every game, you can do that as well. I don't do that in OOTP for one reason. We have 36, 38 games in the Premier League, 46 in championship, plus any cup matches. There's 162 games in baseball. You have 81 games at home, 81 games on the road. And it lasts a long time. So I can get through more seasons by speed simming. And it's pretty similar to what you can do with FM Touch. Same concept. So anyway, that is what's going on there. I think I've hit everything else that I wanted to talk about. I kind of showed some screen comparisons. So, let's go ahead and now open up 19.